He said he's not my boyfriend to the woman at the front desk, and I didn't say anything. Neither did she correct what came next. I'm 31 years old. I build custom furniture out of a workshop behind my house in Clover Ridge, North Carolina. Dining tables mostly, the kind people save up for and then hand down to their kids. I use hand tools when I can. I like the slowness of it. I like knowing exactly where every joint is going before I cut anything. Her name is Sylvia Okafor. She's 30, works as a licensed structural engineer for a mid-sized firm in town, and she has this habit of walking into a room and immediately finding everything that's slightly off. A picture frame, a door hinge, a stair rail. She noticed a hairline crack in my workshop ceiling the first time she ever came over, before she even took off her jacket. We met 4 years ago at a lumberyard of all places. She was there sourcing material specs for a residential renovation her firm was consulting on. I was there buying walnut. She asked me why I was rejecting certain boards, and I told her I was looking at the grain direction, and she said, "That's not entirely different from what I look for in steel." And that was that. We traded numbers. We started texting. Somewhere in there she became the person I called when something went sideways, and I became the person she called when she needed someone to carry something heavy or think something through out loud. 4 years. I'm not going to pretend I didn't know what I felt. I knew. I just kept telling myself the timing wasn't right, or I needed to be more sure, or things were good as they were and I didn't want to wreck it. Every one of those reasons sounded true when I said them to myself at 2 in the morning. Every one of them was a way to stay still. The clinic visit was her idea. She'd been putting off a routine checkup for months and finally booked it on a Tuesday afternoon. She asked me to drive her because her car was in the shop and she hated taking ride shares to medical appointments. It felt too anonymous, she said. She liked having someone she knew in the parking lot. I waited in the lobby while she filled out paperwork at the reception desk. The woman behind the counter was making small talk, glancing between Sylvia and me where I was sitting across the room, and at some point she said something like, "Your husband can come back with you if you'd like." And Sylvia said, "Oh, he's not my husband." And then there was a beat, and the woman said, "Boyfriend then?" And Sylvia said, and I heard this clearly because the room was quiet, "No, he's just very important to me." The woman smiled at that. Sylvia didn't look over at me. She just took her clipboard and sat down 2 seats away and started writing. I looked at the wall. I don't know why I looked at the wall. There was a poster about blood pressure on it. I read the whole thing. On the drive home, she asked if I wanted to stop for food, and I said sure. And we went to a diner we'd been to probably 40 times. We ordered the usual. We talked about her checkup. All fine, nothing to worry about, and about a table commission I was negotiating, and about whether the diner had quietly changed their pie recipe or if she was just remembering it wrong. Normal conversation. Good conversation. I was half present for maybe 30% of it, because I kept replaying the word important. Not boyfriend, not friend, important. I didn't say anything. I drove her home. She hugged me on her porch the way she always did, chin on my shoulder, both arms, no awkwardness, and went inside. I sat in my truck for a moment before I started it. Then I drove home and stayed up until almost 1 in the morning resanding a tabletop that didn't need resanding. I decided I was going to say something. I didn't know exactly when or how, but I was going to. I wasn't going to wait another 4 years for a moment I kept walking past. I started with something small. A week later, I built her a small wall shelf, walnut with hand-cut dovetails, because she'd mentioned twice that she had nowhere to put her keys and mail when she came in the door. I brought it over on a Saturday morning. She held it in both hands and looked at the joinery for a long time without saying anything, the way she looks at structural drawings. "You didn't have to do this," she said. "I know," I said. "I wanted to." She got a little quiet. Then she put it on the kitchen counter and said she'd figure out the best wall to mount it. I went home and thought, say the thing. Soon. Before you talk yourself out of it again. I had a plan. There was a restaurant in town, not fancy, but the kind of place that does things right, and I was going to ask her to dinner, real dinner, just the two of us, framed clearly, not as friends grabbing food. I had a reservation in my head. I was going to make it actual. I texted her on a Wednesday night to say I wanted to take her to dinner that Friday. No context, just that. She didn't respond until the next morning. "Can Friday?" "Busy. Maybe next week?" That was it. No emoji. No what's the occasion, just that. I put my phone down and went back to work. Next week came. I didn't bring it up again because she seemed distracted and a little short on the phone the one time we talked, and I told myself she was probably slammed at work. Her firm had a big municipal project in review. Reasonable. I texted again the following Thursday, asked if Saturday worked. She said she had plans. I said, no problem, we'll find a time. She said, yeah. That was the whole conversation. I went out to my workshop and stood there for a while looking at a half-built coffee table and thought, something is off. This isn't her. Or if it is her, something has changed. I didn't push. I gave it another week. Then my friend Derek, we've known each other since high school, he still lives 2 streets over, sent me a message on a Friday night with a photo attached. It was a screenshot from some local event page, a fundraiser dinner at the Community Arts Center. There was a candid photo someone had posted of the crowd. Sylvia was in it. She was laughing at something, wineglass in hand, and standing close to a man I didn't recognize. His hand was at the small of her back in the way that means something. Derek just sent the photo. No caption. He didn't need one. I looked at it for longer than I should have. The man was probably my height, maybe a little taller. Well dressed in the way that takes effort. The kind of face that photographs well. I had no idea who he was. I put my phone face down on the workbench and finished the coffee table leg I was turning. Took me another hour. I was very precise about it. His name, I found out later from Derek, was Garrett Pullen. He'd moved to Clover Ridge about 3 months earlier. He was in investment consulting, which is one of those titles that can mean anything. He'd introduced himself around town at the right events, said the right things to the right people. Derek knew him slightly through a mutual acquaintance and said he was smooth in a way that made Derek feel tired. I didn't say anything to Sylvia. I didn't know what I had the right to say. We weren't together. I hadn't said the thing I'd been meaning to say for 4 years. Whatever I was feeling, I had no standing to feel it. She called me on a Sunday afternoon about 2 weeks after the photo. Friendly, normal. She talked about a site visit that had gone sideways, a contractor who'd poured a foundation slightly out of square. She was annoyed and funny about it. I listened and asked the right questions and laughed when something was funny. She didn't mention Garrett. I didn't ask. Before we hung up, she said, I miss you. We should actually get together soon. Yeah, I said. I'd like that. She said she'd look at her calendar and text me. She didn't text me. I heard through Derek a week or so after that Sylvia had been seen with Garrett at a few places around town. The coffee shop on Hendricks Street. The Saturday farmer's market. He had reportedly told someone he was thinking about buying property here. That he saw real potential in Clover Ridge. That he liked what was happening with the local economy. He talked about investment opportunities the way some people talk about wine, confidently, with just enough jargon to sound like he knew more than you. A month went by. I kept working. I delivered a dining table to a family in Asheville and started on a commission for a young couple in town, a nursery dresser, which was quiet work, careful work, the kind I like. I didn't reach out to Sylvia more than necessary. I didn't want to be the person standing in the background of her life making things complicated. But I thought about her. That's the honest answer. I thought about her a lot. On a Thursday in early October, I was dropping off some surplus wood at a salvage shop on the edge of town and I saw her. She was across the parking lot getting out of a car, not her car, someone else's, and I realized after a moment that Garrett Pullen was the one driving. He pulled away before I could see his face clearly. She saw me at the same moment I saw her. There was a half second where neither of us did anything, and then she waved and I walked over. She looked different. I'm not sure how to describe it. Tired maybe, but that wasn't exactly it. More like carefully arranged. Like she was holding something in place. Hey, she said, what are you doing here? I told her about the wood. She nodded. We stood there in the parking lot for a moment in the October cold. How are you? I asked. Good, she said. Busy. And then you? Same, I said. She nodded again. She had her keys in her hand and she was turning them the way people do when they're figuring out how to end a conversation, and I had this sudden strong feeling that if I let her walk away in the next 30 seconds, something would close that wouldn't reopen. Sylvia, I said. She looked at me. I've been trying to find the right time to say something to you, I said. And I've been making that an excuse not to say it, so I'm just going to say it. She was very still. I have feelings for you, I said, not new ones. I'd had them for a while. I should have said it before now. I know that. I'm saying it now because I don't know because I don't know. Because I don't want to be the guy who kept waiting for a better moment and missed all the actual moments. She looked at me for what felt like a long time. Then she said, "You're saying this now." It wasn't a question exactly. It had an edge to it. I didn't fully understand. "I know the timing is." "I have to go," she said. Not cold, not angry, just closed. "I'll call you." She went inside the salvage shop. I stood in the parking lot for a minute, then got in my truck and drove. She didn't call. I didn't push. I went back to work. It was Derek again who called me 2 weeks later on a Tuesday night and said I needed to hear something. He'd talked to his acquaintance who knew Garrett Pullen. Really talked, this time after a few drinks, and what he'd heard was not good. Garrett's investment consulting had a particular shape. He found women in smaller cities who had stable professional careers and social standing, engineers, architects, physicians, and he got close to them, earned their trust, and then proposed investment opportunities. Private equity plays, he called them. High yield, short term, only available to people he personally vouched for. He would collect money, sometimes tens of thousands of dollars, sometimes more. The returns would come at first. Small amounts, enough to feel real. Then there would be a complication, a delay, a bridge loan needed, and he would need a little more. And then he would be gone. He'd done some version of this in at least 2 other cities in the southeast. Nobody had pressed charges in those cases. The amounts, though significant, were under the threshold that made lawyers worth the hassle, and the women involved hadn't wanted the attention. I sat with this information for about 10 minutes. Then I tried calling Sylvia. She didn't answer. I texted, "I need to talk to you, it's important. Please call me." She read it. The red receipt came through. She didn't respond. I sat there for another few minutes and then I got in my truck. Her apartment was about 12 minutes from my house. I'd been there so many times I could have driven it without thinking. I parked in the visitor lot and went to her door and knocked. She answered after a moment. She was in what looked like work clothes still. Blazer, her hair pulled back. She looked at me and then past me and then back at me. "You texted," she said. "Gonna come in?" She stepped back. I came in. Her apartment was the way I knew it. Neat, intentional, a level and a tape measure on the kitchen counter because she was that person. The shelf I'd made her was mounted by the door, her keys hanging on it. I hadn't known until that moment that she'd actually put it up. I told her what I'd learned about Garrett Pullen. All of it. I didn't soften it, and I didn't dramatize it. I told her what Derek had told me, where the information came from, what the pattern looked like. She stood at the kitchen counter the entire time and didn't say anything. When I finished, she was quiet for a moment. "He already asked me," she said, "to look at an opportunity with him. Private placement. He said it was how he'd grown his own portfolio." "How much?" I asked. She told me. It was more than I expected. "Did you give it to him?" She looked at me for a moment. "No," she said. "I hadn't decided yet. I was still looking at the documentation." She paused. There were things in the documents that didn't add up. I was going to ask him about it. Of course there were. She was a structural engineer. She looked at documents the way she looked at ceilings. "He's done this before," I said. "In Raleigh, I think, and somewhere in Georgia." She nodded once, slowly. Something was moving behind her eyes that I couldn't quite read. "Okay," she said. She pushed off the counter and picked up her phone. "I need to make some calls. I have a friend at the DA's office." "Okay," I said. I stayed while she made the calls. I didn't get in the way. I sat at her kitchen table and waited, and she paced her living room, speaking quietly and precisely in that way she has when something requires her full professional attention. She knew how to talk to people in formal contexts. She knew how to present information. I made coffee because I needed something to do with my hands. After the calls, she came and sat across from me at the kitchen table. She wrapped both hands around her mug. We sat there for a while. "How did you know?" she said finally. "Derek found out and told me." "No," she said. "How did you know to come tonight? You could have waited. You could have texted." I thought about that. "I didn't want to wait anymore," I said. "I've done a lot of waiting. It hasn't worked out that well." She looked at me. It was a long look, the kind she gives to things she's trying to measure. I heard what you said, she said. In the parking lot. I know. I had. I wasn't in a good place to hear it. That day. I know, I said. You don't owe me an explanation. I'm trying to give you one, she said, a little sharp, and I stopped talking. She looked at her coffee. When you kept not saying anything for 4 years, I figured I'd misread it. I thought I was making something into something it wasn't. Garrett was very present. That sounds stupid. He paid attention in a way that felt intentional, like I wasn't just someone in the room. You were never just someone in the room, I said. She looked up at me. I know I was bad at showing that, I said. I'm not asking you to take my word for it. I'm just saying it's true. The apartment was quiet. Outside her window, it had started to rain. The soft kind. The kind October does well in Western Carolina. You built me that shelf, she said. Yeah. You drove 12 minutes at 9 at night to tell me something that made you no good to me in any obvious way. I didn't have an answer for that, so I didn't give one. She looked at the shelf by the door. Her keys were on it. The dovetails are really clean, she said. Thank you, I said. It took me longer than it should have. That made her laugh, a short, quiet one, and something in the room shifted. I'm going to need a few days, she said, to deal with Garrett, to deal with all of this. Of course. And then, she said, I think I'd like to go to dinner. Actually, not just food. I looked at her. I know you asked, she said. Twice. I wasn't there yet. I think I'm there now. Okay, I said. Okay, she said. I left when it was clear she was all right, which she was, because she is not someone who needs you to stay past the moment you're needed. She's always known exactly how much help she wants and from whom. I drove home in the rain with the heater on low and the radio off. Garrett Pullen left Clover Ridge 3 weeks later. He didn't do it voluntarily. The DA's office made clear enough that his next move was going to be uncomfortable if he stayed. There were no charges filed in the end. Not enough paper. But he was gone, and the people he'd been working on knew what he was, and that was enough. Sylvia texted me the following Friday. Free tomorrow. Is that restaurant offer still open? I said yes. I made the reservation that afternoon. We went. It was the place I'd been thinking about. A converted mill building on the edge of town, exposed brick, small menu. The kind of place that's not trying to be anything other than what it is. She wore something dark blue that I don't have the vocabulary to describe accurately. She looked like herself, but more so, if that makes any sense. We sat across from each other for 3 hours. We talked about everything and nothing. A project she was starting. A wood species I'd been wanting to work with. The mill building's original floor system, which she'd already cataloged by the time the food arrived. We talked about the 4 years. We didn't avoid it. It was better when we didn't. I kept thinking you were going to say something, she said at one point, and then you'd just not. I know, I said. I had a lot of very convincing arguments for waiting. What changed? I thought about the clinic lobby, the word important, the parking lot in October with the keys in her hand. I got tired of talking myself out of it, I said. She nodded, like that made sense to her. At the end of the night, in the parking lot, she stopped walking before we got to my truck. She turned and looked at me and said, For what it's worth, I was never going to give him the money. I knew something was off. I just needed to work out the math. I know, I said. You're good at the math. You could have trusted me with that. I know, I said. I'm sorry. She considered this for a moment with the same expression she uses on structural drawings. Then she nodded, like she'd decided something. She kissed me in the parking lot. It was raining again, lightly, the same soft October rain. She was very precise about it, which I should have guessed she would be. I drove her home. We sat in front of her building for a while with the engine idling. She had her hand in mine in that way that feels simple once it's finally happening, like it's been waiting for permission. You know, she said, for someone who works with his hands all day, you took a long time to reach for something. I'm aware, I said. She laughed. She got out. She turned at the door and looked back once before she went inside. I stayed until the light came on in her apartment, the way I always do when I drop her off. Then I went home, and for the first time in I don't know how long, I slept without needing to sand anything. I kept thinking about the words she used. Not friend, not boyfriend, important. She said it to a stranger in a quiet clinic lobby like it was the most natural thing in the world, and I sat across the room and read a blood pressure poster like I hadn't heard it. That's where the whole 4 years lived, honestly, in that gap between what I felt and what I was willing to do about it. I used to think waiting was the same as being careful, that if I just gave it enough time, the right moment would present itself and I'd know exactly what to say. What I understand now is that I was confusing patience with avoidance. Real patience is active. It's building towards something. What I was doing was standing still and calling it caution. Sylvia never stopped being who she was the entire time. She looked at documents the way she looked at ceilings. She wasn't going to miss the thing that was off. She'd already spotted the inconsistencies in Garrett's paperwork before I showed up at her door. She didn't need me to rescue her from anything. What she needed, and what I almost failed to give her, was someone who respected her enough to show up honestly. Someone who told her the truth about Garrett and about himself without waiting for a safer version of the conversation. That's the thing about integrity that I don't think gets said plainly enough. It's not just about being honest when it's easy. It's about being honest when you're scared, when you're not sure how it'll land, when there's a real chance it changes everything. I was scared for 4 years. I dressed it up as timing, as respect, as not wanting to complicate things. But underneath all of that, I just didn't want to be wrong out loud. Garrett Pullen, for all his surface competence, was built on the opposite of honesty. He manufactured the appearance of trustworthiness without any of the substance. He knew exactly which words made people feel seen. He just didn't mean any of them. And for a while, that worked. Until it didn't. What protects you from someone like that isn't suspicion. It's the kind of clarity that comes from knowing your own mind well enough to notice when something doesn't add up. Sylvia had that clarity. She trusted her own read on the numbers. She didn't override her instincts because someone was charming. That's a kind of intelligence that doesn't come from credentials. It comes from practice, from paying attention, from refusing to be lazy about things that matter. And then there's the part that cost me the most to admit. Knowing what's right and doing it anyway, even when it's uncomfortable, even when it costs you something. That's the part I kept skipping. I'd get to the edge of the conversation and find a reason to step back. It took standing in a parking lot in October, watching her about to walk away, to understand that the thing I was most afraid of losing was already slipping through the gap I'd created by not reaching for it. The shelf is still by her door. Her keys hang on it every night. I built it in about 2 hours. It took me 4 years to understand what I was actually making it for.